facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. That quote, often tied to Aldous Huxley, feels, well, pretty relevant today.
It really does. Sets the stage quite well.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take complex topics, sift through the sources, and give you the essentials clear, concise, and hopefully engaging.
Exactly. We do the heavy lifting. You get the insights.
And today, we're diving into something that's been making waves. Recent changes around COVID-19 vaccination advice, specifically for pregnant people. We're basing this on reporting, including a key piece from Newsline.
Our goal here is pretty clear. We want to unpack what this source material tells us, understand the worries coming from major health groups, look at the science they're pointing to, and explore what it all means for policy and, importantly, for access to care.
And this isn't just theory. It's vital for understanding what's happening right now in public health policy. Super relevant if you're tracking current events, maybe for exams like the UPSC, where these intersections are key.
Absolutely. But honestly, it's important for anyone just trying to navigate health information today.
Okay, then. Let's unpack this. So the article kicks off by describing a kind of alarm bell situation.
Yeah.
Major health organizations seem quite concerned.
That's right. The source highlights a strong reaction from some very prominent medical organizations. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, is mentioned specifically.
ACOG, right. A major voice in women's health.
And they're not alone. The article says they're joined by, get this, 30 other professional health organizations.
30? Wow. That's quite a coalition. So what are they doing?
They've taken a pretty direct step. According to the source, they've sent an open letter straight to payers and insurance companies.
Interesting. Straight to the insurers. Why that route? What prompted it?
Well, the article connects it directly to a specific federal policy change. It points to a decision made by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Okay, and what was that decision?
He decided to remove the recommendation for COVID-19 vaccination for two specific groups: healthy children and, crucially for our discussion, healthy pregnant patients.
Remove the recommendation entirely for those groups.
That's what the source states. And it adds a key detail about how this decision was reportedly made. Basically, it sidestepped the usual scientific decision-making process within the agency.
Uh-huh. So the organizations feel the standard scientific input was bypassed?
That seems to be their core procedural concern, yes.
Yeah.
The source also provides some related context about the Federal Vaccine Advisory Committee.
Ah, yes, I saw that. What did it say?
It reports that Secretary Kennedy had earlier dismissed all 17 experts on that committee.
All of them?
All 17, and replaced them with 8 new members. The article specifically notes that 4 of these new appointees have in the past expressed views critical of vaccines.
So a new recommendation and a reconstituted advisory board with members known to be vaccine skeptical. You can see why established health groups might be alarmed.
Exactly. The source paints a picture of health experts being deeply concerned. They're worried about vaccine coverage, about access, especially given what they see as, well, a dismissal of the scientific evidence by the agency.
Their letter even used the phrase deeply concerned, didn't it?
Yes, the source quotes that directly. Deeply concerned about the recently adopted HHS policy.
Okay, so the battle lines seem drawn based on process and policy. Let's shift to the substance. What's the actual scientific case these 30-plus organizations are making in their letter? Why do they think the recommendation should have stayed?
This is really the heart of their argument, grounded in clinical data. The letter, as the article describes it, stresses the risks of getting COVID-19 while pregnant.
Right, the risks of the infection itself.
Precisely. They state very clearly that pregnant individuals face a higher risk of serious complications if they get infected.
And what kind of complications are we talking about, according to the source?
The article mentions several serious ones reported in the letter. Things like blood clots needing intensive care unit admission,
ICU admission,
requiring ventilators, and even, tragically, a higher risk of death for the pregnant person.
That's incredibly serious. And does it mention risks to the baby?
Yes, it does. The source notes the letter cites studies showing that infants born to mothers who had COVID during pregnancy face higher risks too. Things like low birth weight, stillbirth, and breathing problems, respiratory distress.
So, significant risks to both mother and child from the infection. Given that, what's their case for getting vaccinated during pregnancy?
They argue, based on the data available, that the COVID-19 vaccines are both safe and effective specifically during pregnancy. That's the core message detailed in the article.
Safe and effective. And does it protect both?
Yes. The letter emphasizes that. It protects the pregnant person directly, and it also protects the baby.
How does it protect the baby? Is it through antibodies?
That's exactly what the source says the letter explains. It states that newborns depend on maternal antibodies from the vaccine for protection.
So the mother gets the vaccine, develops antibodies, and passes them to the baby.
Right. It provides passive immunity, offering protection during those very vulnerable first months after birth.
That's a key benefit. The article also quoted the ACOG president, Dr. Fleischman. Right.
Yes, Dr. Stephen J. Fleischman, he's quoted calling the vaccines a remarkable scientific accomplishment.
Strong words.
And he says they remain the best tool against severe COVID outcomes. He emphasizes that Obgyn see firsthand how dangerous the infection can be in pregnancy and that the vaccine protects both the patient and their infant.
Okay, so the scientific position from this large group of health organizations, based on the source, is very clear. Infection is risky, vaccination is safe, effective, and protects both mother and baby.
That's the case they're laying out very firmly.
Right. So if the science case is that strong in their view, let's talk practicalities. What are their specific concerns about access now that the federal recommendation is gone?
Well, that leads directly back to their letter to the insurers. Their main ask, according to the article, is for insurers to keep the vaccine available for pregnant people without undue utilization management or cost-sharing requirements.
Basically, don't make it harder or more expensive to get.
Exactly. They want to head off any new barriers, and cost is a major part of that concern.
Is a specific cost mentioned?
The article points out that, yeah, without insurance coverage, getting one of the mRNA shots, Pfizer or Moderna, could cost around $140 out of pocket for an adult.
Oof. $140. That's not trivial, especially when you're expecting a baby.
Definitely not. It could easily make someone hesitate or skip the vaccine altogether, even if their doctor recommends it.
And Dr. Fleischman linked this cost issue back to public health, didn't he?
He did. The quote included in the source is quite direct. He says when patients are forced to pay out of pocket or to cover high cost sharing, they are less likely to be able to protect themselves, their families, and their communities.
So it's not just an individual problem, it impacts community protection.
That's his argument, a potential setback for public health overall.
Now, the federal government changed its recommendation. But health policy isn't just federal. What about the states? Does the article mention how states are reacting?
It gives a few examples, and it shows there isn't one single response. For instance, Wisconsin is mentioned.
What's Wisconsin doing?
They're sticking with their recommendation for the vaccine during pregnancy, and for everyone 6 months and up. The source also notes Wisconsin Medicaid will keep covering it.
Okay, so status quo in Wisconsin. Any others?
Georgia officials apparently also expect coverage to continue, but then you have Washington State.
What about Washington?
Their state health agency's advice, as reported, is a bit more nuanced. They're telling pregnant people to talk with their healthcare provider to figure out if vaccination is the best choice for them individually.
Interesting. So some divergence there. Not a unified state front.
It seems to highlight that state approaches can vary, even when federal guidance shifts.
The article also touches on a broader legislative context too, doesn't it? Regarding the vaccine technology itself.
Yes, it adds that piece of context. It mentions that during legislative sessions this year, at least 7 states introduced bills that aimed to either ban or limit mRNA vaccines specifically.
7 states. So there's an ongoing political discussion in some places about this type of vaccine.
Exactly. And just for clarity, the source briefly explains mRNA vaccines.
Right, how they work differently from traditional ones.
Yeah, it clarifies they use lab-made genetic code mRNA to tell your cells to make a protein, which then triggers the immune system, rather than using a weakened or dead virus like older vaccines. The Pfizer and Moderna shots use this tech.
Okay, so putting it all together, we have a federal recommendation removed, sparking concern from dozens of major health groups who cite strong science for vaccination and pregnancy. They're worried about access, especially cost. Meanwhile, states are reacting differently, and there's this background noise of some legislative efforts against mRNA tech. It's complex.
It really is. The source lays out these different forces quite clearly: the scientific consensus from these groups, the policy shift, the access concerns, the state variations.
So let's pull these threads together for our listeners. Why does digging into this specific situation matter? How does this connect to the bigger picture, especially for those, say, studying for UPSC exams or just trying to understand current events?
Well, what this case really throws into sharp relief is that complicated dance between scientific evidence, public health guidelines, government policy, and, yes, potential political influence.
You mentioned RFK Jr.'s actions in the Trump administration context earlier. based on the source?
Yes, the source presents that sequence of events, including the advisory board changes and the policy decision, framing it within that political context of we're just reporting how the source describes it.
And all these high-level factors, science, policy, politics, they eventually trickle down, don't they?
They absolutely do. They impact whether real people can easily get health care that's recommended by large parts of the medical community and what it's going to cost them.
So this isn't abstract at all.
Not in the slightest. It's a concrete example of how scientific guidance, the traditional foundation for public health, can clash with policy decisions. And those clashes have direct consequences for individuals, their health choices, their finances.
For anyone tracking current affairs, this is like a case study in motion. Understanding how evidence gets used or maybe ignored, how policy is shaped, how it affects people on the ground. That's critical knowledge.
Definitely crucial for understanding public administration, health policy. So yes, relevant for UPSC mains, maybe even prelims through general awareness, but also just for being an engaged citizen.
It really shows the challenges in public health right now.
No question about it.
Okay, so we've taken a deep dive today looking at the strong concerns from major health organizations about these changes to COVID vaccine advice for pregnant people. We've explored the science they point to and the potential impacts on access and cost, all drawn from our source material in Newsline.
And the core tension is clear. A large segment of the medical community pushing for continued coverage based on science, reacting against federal policy shifts they find worrying.
As we wrap up, here's something to maybe mull over. When federal health advice changes in a way that major medical bodies say sidesteps the science, what does that do to public trust? And maybe more importantly, how do we ensure that groups considered vulnerable don't suddenly face new hurdles to getting care that has broad scientific backing?
That's a really critical question to think about. The long-term implications are significant.
Indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope breaking down this complex issue has been helpful, whether you're studying current affairs or just trying to stay informed.
We really appreciate you tuning in.
If you found this useful, please do hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us keep these conversations going. And definitely leave a comment below. Any questions, any thoughts on the topic? We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for being part of the discussion.